Roman Senate versus U.S. Congress. Power, corruption, and decline. The United States likes to think of itself as the heir to Athens, the child of the Enlightenment, the model of modern democracy. But look closer at the architecture of Washington, the marble columns, the domed rotundas, the very word Senate. These are not Greek gifts. They are Roman echoes, and Rome's story carries a warning. The Roman Republic was proud of its checks and balances, its elected officials, its devotion to the rule of law. To the outside world, it looked unshakable, but inside, the foundations were already cracking. Senators traded influence for gold. Generals turned crises into opportunities. Ordinary citizens found comfort not in ballots, but in bread and circuses. Sound familiar? Because in America, we, too, talk about checks and balances. We, too, celebrate representative government, but trust in Congress has collapsed to historic lows. Money dominates elections, crises expand executive power, and politics feels more and more like a performance scripted for cameras, consumed like entertainment, and forgotten the next day. Rome didn't lose the Republic in a single battle. It lost it in plain sight while pretending everything was the same. The Senate survived in name long after it had lost its soul. And if Rome could vote itself out of freedom, could America? This isn't a tour of marble ruins, it's a mirror held up by the entire history of the Roman Empire. A story about how republics, ancient and modern, build masks of democracy to hide the machinery of power. So the question isn't what happened to them. The question is, what's happening to us? Part 1. Mask of Democracy. The Roman Republic didn't fall because it was weak. It fell because people stopped believing the Senate mattered. Walk the marble ruins of the Roman Forum today, and you'll see broken columns standing like gravestones. But 2,000 years ago, those columns framed the most powerful legislative body on earth, the Roman Senate. To ordinary Romans, it was the place where their future was debated, their laws written, their destiny decided, or so they thought. From the very beginning, Rome's Senate was less a voice of the people and more a stage for its elite. The so-called patres, the aristocratic fathers, filled its benches not because of elections, but because of ancestry. If your family name traced back to the founding clans, you had a seat. If not, you could shout from the crowd, but you had no vote inside. America tells a different story, right? Congress was founded as a bold experiment, we the people. And yet, how many Americans today feel their representatives truly listen? How many believe Congress is more performance than policy? Some say democracy doesn't die in silence, it dies in laughter, when the audience stops taking the play seriously. By 312 BCE, likely in the early 310s, the plebiscitum Ovinium, often called the Lex Ovinia, had already shifted the power of choosing senators from consuls to censors. In practice, the censors still favored the wealthy elite. But the reality? Those censors almost always chose men from the wealthiest classes, even when reforms expanded the pool of citizens. Politics remained a rich man's game. Here's a twist. Roman senators weren't paid, because office was considered a privilege for those who could afford it, which meant that only men with vast estates and private wealth could participate. Politics wasn't about serving the people, it was about protecting investments. The Senate wasn't a paycheck, it was a portfolio. Does that logic sound outdated or uncomfortably current? In Washington, members of Congress technically earn a salary, but the real game, as every lobbyist knows, is the revolving door. Retire from Congress, step into a lobbying firm, and suddenly your Rolodex is worth millions. Just as Roman senators used office to secure governorships and lucrative contracts, modern lawmakers eye post-career rewards in think tanks, board seats, and consulting gigs. If democracy is supposed to level the playing field, Why does it keep tilting toward those who already own the board? A senator in 63 BCE rises to speak, Cicero's booming voice echoing in marble halls. He talks about defending the republic while privately cutting deals with financiers. Now jump forward to the U.S. Capitol. A congressman delivers a passionate floor speech about protecting Main Street while campaign donations from Wall Street bankroll his re-election. Different language, same choreography. Here's something you won't hear in high school textbooks. Roman elections were often decided by outright bribery. Candidates would hand out food, games, or even cash to win votes. The Romans had a word for it, ambitus, literally walking around, because politicians paraded through the city handing out favors. Now fast forward, in 2024, U.S. congressional elections cost nearly $9 billion in total. No envelopes of coins, but the principle is the same. Money buys influence. Lobbying firms spend billions because they expect billions back in tax breaks, contracts, and favorable laws. So ask yourself, is this democracy or just ambitus with better lighting? Rome's official motto was SPQR, the Senate and people of Rome. But notice the order, Senate first, people second. In America, the Constitution begins with we the people. Yet how often do the people feel like the afterthought? Democracy, it seems, is always written in bold letters, but lived in small print. Polls show that fewer than 20% of Americans today approve of Congress. 2 millennia ago, Romans joked that their Senate was a place of endless speeches, few decisions, and many hidden deals. When cynicism becomes the default, the institution has already hollowed out long before it officially collapses. What empire are you living in today? The Roman one that pretended the Senate was the people's voice, or the American one that still insists Congress is? Part 2. Power bought, power sold. Rome had ambitus, the crime of buying votes with bread and coins. America has super PACs, different names, same principle, democracy for sale. If part 1 showed how Rome and America dressed power in the mask of democracy, part 2 reveals what fed that mask: money. For Romans, politics was not a career, it was a gamble. Winning office required more than speeches or talent. It demanded cash, favors, games, and gifts. Ordinary voters came for spectacle, not policy, and candidates obliged. They poured out coins, sponsored gladiatorial shows, hosted feasts, all to secure votes. Today, American voters don't receive bread loaves on street corners. They see endless ads, social media campaigns, and billion-dollar election cycles. The packaging changed, the principle didn't. Years before his consulship, in 65 BCE, Caesar as Aedile staged lavish games funded by massive loans from Crassus, sinking deep into debt. By 59 BCE, he secured the consulship through powerful alliances and then used his command in Gaul, 58 to 50 BCE, to seize plunder and repay creditors. Elections were investments. Office was the return. In 63 BCE, Cicero's Lex Tullia de Ambitu banned candidates from staging public entertainments in the 2 years before running for office and increased penalties for bribery. But everyone ignored it. Candidates simply disguised gifts as favors or hosted games months earlier. Laws existed not to stop corruption, but to provide ammunition against rivals. Now zoom to Washington. D.C., a Senate seat today often costs tens of millions of dollars. In 2022, the Pennsylvania Senate race crossed $350 million and is spending the most expensive in history. And who pays? Wealthy donors, corporations, interest groups. Ordinary citizens do give $20 here, $50 there, but their voices are drowned in the flood of super PAC money unleashed by the 2010 Citizens United decision. Corporations can now spend unlimited sums to influence elections, all under the banner of free speech. So ask yourself, if the volume knob is turned up by billions of dollars, can the average voter even be heard? Democracy claims one citizen, one vote. Money claims otherwise. In Rome, votes followed those who fed the people. In America, policies often follow those who fund campaigns. Representation begins to look less like equality and more like a transaction. And here's the danger. When politics becomes transaction, citizens stop seeing themselves as participants. They become spectators, and spectators are easy to distract. History repeats itself, but only for those who forget the ending. So why are we replaying Act 2 of Rome's downfall? Cicero, the great orator, condemned corruption publicly, yet privately. Even he admitted that gifts and generosity were the currency of politics. Hypocrisy wasn't the exception. It was the system. Fast forward, modern lawmakers give fiery speeches about reform while dialing donors for hours each week. The average member of Congress spends 20-30 hours fundraising during campaign season. Who, then, are they serving, voters or donors? Take lobbying. In 2023, lobbyists spent nearly $4 billion influencing Congress. That's 4 billion reasons why pharmaceutical prices stay high, why tax loopholes survive, why policies often serve corporations before citizens. In Rome, tax collectors called publicani bid for contracts, then squeeze provinces for profit. In Washington, lobbyists shape bills before they ever reach a vote. Different titles, same transaction. If democracy is supposed to give power to the many, why does it keep bending toward the few? Romans eventually lost faith. Elections became predictable, dominated by the wealthy. Citizens stopped caring who won because they knew the system was rigged. That apathy cracked the Republic, paving the way for strongmen like Caesar, who promised to bypass corruption and rule directly. America now faces a similar erosion. Pew surveys show that only about 20% of Americans trust the federal government most of the time. Approval ratings of Congress sink lower each year. When trust collapses, people stop engaging. And when people stop engaging, the stage is cleared for someone to claim, "Only I can fix it." What empire are you living in, the Roman one that sold votes, or the American one auctioning influence? Rome called it ambitus. America calls it campaign finance. But the name matters less than the effect. Politics captured by wealth. Once that capture becomes normal, democracy is hollowed from within. Rome learned too late. The US still has time. But history leaves a warning etched in stone. Once money buys power, power rarely gives it back. Part 3. Crisis as opportunity. Empires rarely die of enemies. They die of erosion, and erosion always accelerates in times of crisis. In Rome, crises were not interruptions, they were accelerants. Each emergency, whether famine, rebellion, or invasion, became the excuse for leaders to grab more power. Temporary solutions hardened into permanent precedents. In America, the pattern is eerily familiar. Wars, terror attacks, pandemics, economic collapse. Each moment of fear has tilted the balance toward executive power and away from Congress. The Constitution promises checks and balances, but in crisis, the scales tip. So ask yourself, do crises protect democracy or quietly rewire it? In 82 BCE, Lucius Cornelius Sulla marched his legions into Rome. The Senate, desperate to restore order, granted him a temporary dictatorship. Appointed dictator under the Lex Valeria of 82 BCE without a time limit, Sulla ruled until 79 BCE. He rewrote Rome's laws, carried out brutal prescriptions with rewards for informers, and reshaped the republic in his image before resigning. When he finally stepped down, the republic was never the same. Sulla even published prescription lists, names of citizens declared enemies of the state. Anyone could kill them, seize their property, and earn a reward. Romans cheered at first, order returned, but soon they realized the republic had legalized fear. Crisis became the currency of power. Fast forward to America. After 9/11, Congress passed the Patriot Act with lightning speed. Surveillance expanded, privacy shrank. These measures were called temporary, yet 2 decades later, many provisions remain proof that, as the entire history of the Roman Empire suggests, temporary powers hardened into precedent. After the 2008 financial crash, emergency bailouts saved banks but left millions of ordinary Americans in foreclosure. During the COVID-19 pandemic, governors and presidents invoked sweeping emergency powers. Businesses closed, movement restricted. Temporary authority once again left lasting marks. History whispers, power borrowed in crisis is rarely returned on time. So what happens when the next emergency arrives? Republics pride themselves on distrust of concentrated power, yet fear makes citizens forget philosophy. In chaos, strong leaders look like saviors. In Rome, people surrendered rights to Sulla, then Caesar, then Augustus. In America, citizens accept executive orders, warrantless surveillance, and military interventions, all in the name of stability. But stability for whom? And at what cost? Consider 49 BCE, Julius Caesar, denied re-election and threatened with prosecution, crossed the Rubicon with his army. His justification? Defending the rights of his supporters against a corrupt Senate. The Senate, weakened by decades of crisis politics, could not resist. Caesar's march destroyed the republic. In America, the Constitution gives Congress the sole power to declare war. Yet presidents have launched military actions again and again: Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Libya, often without formal declarations. Congress complains, but rarely does it stop them. Just as Rome's Senate yielded to ambitious generals, Congress yields to presidents who claim emergencies demand speed, not debate. Sound familiar? When lawmakers surrender their role, who really governs? Romans grew accustomed to strongmen. They no longer trusted the Senate to govern without them. And once citizens expect strongmen, they get emperors. In America, public trust in Congress is near historic lows. Many citizens see it as paralyzed, gridlocked, incapable of action. The vacuum tempts presidents to go it alone. Each time they succeed, expectations shift. The people start believing that one leader, not a legislature, delivers results. The danger isn't one leader, one law, one moment. It's the chain. Each crisis adds a new link. The chain gets heavier until freedom can no longer lift it. Rome didn't collapse because it lost a war. It collapsed because its citizens accepted that emergencies justified endless concentration of power. America risks repeating the script. Every new crisis becomes justification for the erosion of checks and balances. What empire are you living in, the one that learned from history, or the one determined to repeat it? Crises never really end. They morph, they linger, they justify. Rome handed away liberty for stability, until stability itself became another word for empire. America must decide, will the next emergency strengthen democracy or finish rewriting it? Because once the die is cast, history rarely lets it be rolled back. Part 4. Bread, spectacle, and distraction. Rome built amphitheaters, America built stadiums. Both promised the same bargain: distraction in exchange for obedience. In Rome, when citizens grew restless, emperors didn't reform policy. They staged shows. Gladiators fought to the death. Exotic animals were slaughtered, and feasts poured from imperial coffers. This wasn't generosity, it was strategy. The poet Juvenal nailed it with 2 words: panem et circenses, bread and circuses. Feed the belly, entertain the eye, silence the mind. In America, no lions leap into arenas, but the principle lives on. Our spectacles come in different packaging: endless news cycles, social media outrage, culture war theatrics, billion-dollar sports. Leaders know that a distracted public is a governable public. The Colosseum could seat roughly 50,000 to 65,000 spectators. Public games were typically free, since emperors or magistrates paid the costs and sometimes food was distributed to the crowd. Emperors used these events not just for popularity, but for control. After riots or unpopular tax hikes, spectacles multiplied, anger turned into applause. Commodus, son of Marcus Aurelius, even stepped into the arena himself. He dressed as Hercules, striking down tethered beasts or wounded opponents. The crowd roared. Few realized the grotesque truth. Their emperor was staging fake victories to maintain real power. Today, presidents and politicians don't fight lions, they fight for attention. Campaign rallies resemble concerts, complete with music, lights, and choreographed chants. Congressional hearings are broadcast like courtroom dramas. Even Supreme Court nominations become primetime theater. Media magnifies it all. Scandal outshines policy. Headlines eclipse nuance. Elections feel less like civic duty and more like reality television. So ask yourself, are we watching democracy or binge watching its performance? Spectacle doesn't just distract, it replaces. Romans once voted in assemblies. Later, they stopped showing up. Why bother when bread was free and games more exciting? Citizenship devolved into spectatorship. The people weren't governing, they were watching governance performed as theater. In America, the same substitution is underway. Voter turnout lags behind viewership of political debates. Millions skip elections, but live tweet every twist. Politics becomes content. Citizens become consumers. And here's the haunting question. When we scroll, when we cheer, when we boo, are we shaping politics? Or is politics shaping us? Roman emperors used games to bury crises. During grain shortages, they announced free gladiatorial shows. During wars, they staged triumphal parades. The louder the drums of entertainment, the quieter the dissent. Look at America's own crises. In 2008, during the financial crash, headlines shifted quickly from policy debates to celebrity scandals. In 2020, during the pandemic, political discourse often devolved into culture wars about masks and tweets. Real struggles, inequality, healthcare, economic fragility were drowned in endless noise. If bread and circuses once pacified Rome, what pacifies us today? Netflix binges, cable news shouting matches, viral outrage? Romans eventually stopped believing their voices mattered. They gave up assemblies for amphitheaters, and once they ceased to demand accountability, emperors ruled unchecked. In America, public trust in Congress is near rock bottom. Yet stadiums are full, news ratings soar during political drama, and social media thrives on outrage. Engagement hasn't disappeared, it's been redirected. From civic responsibility to spectacle. What empire are you living in today, one built on participation, or one fueled by distraction? Distraction is not neutral, it numbs outrage. It replaces reform with ritual. Rome drowned in performances until citizens forgot how to demand more. America risks doing the same when politics is consumed as entertainment, when zingers matter more than laws, when scandal becomes more addictive than solutions. History asks, when citizens settle for being an audience, who really writes the play? Rome's emperors mastered distraction. America industrialized it. Bread and circuses kept Rome obedient. Ratings and rallies keep America entertained. The costumes change, but the logic endures. And here's the question every viewer must face. Are you a participant in your republic or just an audience in someone else's show? Part 5. Decline in plain sight. The Roman Senate didn't vanish overnight, it survived for centuries, long after it had lost all power. That's what decline really looks like. Survival without significance. Rome's Senate never closed its doors. Senators still gathered, still debated, still passed decrees stamped with the proud initials SPQR. But by the age of Augustus, these rituals were performance, not governance. Real power had shifted to the emperor. The Senate continued to meet only because it gave the illusion that the republic still breathed. In Washington, Congress still debates, still votes, still holds hearings broadcast live on C-SPAN. Yet how many Americans actually believe those proceedings shape the nation's future? Trust has crumbled, and approval ratings scrape the bottom. Citizens sense decisions are made elsewhere in the Oval Office, in corporate boardrooms, in lobbyists' offices. Like Rome, America's legislature risks becoming ritual without substance. When Augustus theatrically announced the restoration of the Republic in 27 BCE, the Senate cheered. But in reality, he retained proconsular imperium over Rome's military provinces, meaning the legions. With the rise of the imperial fiscus and his network of procurators, real financial control shifted to him, and after 23 BCE, his tribunician powers cemented his supremacy. The Senate retained only scraps honors, ceremonies, minor provincial administration. Yet citizens played along because the facade of the Republic felt comforting. Under later emperors, senators fought not for laws but for favor. Some bribed imperial officials for ceremonial titles. Others praised emperors in speeches that no longer carried weight. The Senate had become theater, actors in togas, mouthing lines already written by someone else. In theory, America's Congress writes laws, declares wars, and checks the president. In practice, presidents launch military actions without formal declarations. Budgets are passed through brinkmanship and shutdown threats. Executive orders increasingly bypass the legislative process. Lobbyists draft bills while lawmakers deliver sound bites. Citizens see performance, not policymaking. So ask yourself, is Congress still leading or simply acting out its part on stage? Decline rarely announces itself. It disguises itself as continuity. Rome still had senators, just as America will still have congressmen. But when institutions lose trust, their ceremonies become hollow. Citizens disengage, cynicism grows, and in that vacuum, strong men thrive. History repeats. When people stop believing in legislatures, who steps in to fill the void? As Tacitus noted in the Annals, under the emperors, the Senate often debated not real policy, but how best to display obedience, turning deliberation into ritual. That chilling line captures the transformation. An institution built to check power had become a tool to sanctify it. Think of modern congressional hearings. Lawmakers grill CEOs or government officials in front of cameras. Viral clips spread. Yet behind the theatrics, little changes. Tech companies still dominate markets. Pharmaceutical prices remain high. Citizens watch the spectacle, but feel the emptiness afterward. Just like Romans who left the Colosseum entertained but unchanged. Romans, disillusioned, stopped participating. Why attend assemblies that no longer mattered? Why believe in a Senate that rubber-stamped imperial decisions? The Republic died not with rebellion, but with apathy. In America, voter turnout hovers around 50–60%. Millions no longer believe voting matters. Many say both parties are the same. Both systems corrupt. Cynicism spreads faster than faith. And when citizens step back, power concentrates further in fewer hands. If people no longer believe their voices count, what stops democracy from becoming pure theater? Decline is not collapse. It is transformation. Rome didn't bury its Senate, it embalmed it, paraded it, pretended it still mattered. America's Congress could follow the same path, maintaining ceremony while losing substance. And once the mask becomes more important than the face, the institution is already gone. What empire are you living in, one where Congress governs, or one where Congress performs governance? Rome's Senate lived on in name long after its power was gone. A museum of rituals, a shadow of authority. The people stopped believing. Emperors ruled. America's Congress still shines beneath the Capitol dome. Cameras roll, speeches echo, votes tally. But if belief fades, if trust vanishes, if cynicism cements, then the decline is already here, happening in plain sight. And here's the hardest truth. Decline doesn't look like collapse. It looks like business as usual, until one day, you realize the Republic has been gone for years. The story of Rome's Senate doesn't end with fire in the Forum or barbarians at the gates. It ends more quietly, and perhaps more hauntingly. Senators still dressed in white togas. Decrees were still stamped with the proud initials SPQR. Speeches still echoed across marble walls. To the casual eye, the Republic endured. But to those who looked closer, it was already gone. Real power had shifted elsewhere, to the emperors, to the generals, to those who commanded armies and wealth. The Senate survived, yes, but only as a shadow. It became ritual without authority, ceremony without meaning, politics without power. Now, look at America. The Capitol dome still gleams, Congress still meets, elections still come and go, yet approval ratings sink, trust collapses, cynicism spreads. Many believe lobbyists, corporations, or presidents wield more influence than the people's representatives. The rituals remain, but what about the substance? Rome reminds us, decline doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't always arrive with an invader's sword. Sometimes, decline wears the mask of continuity. It looks like business as usual. It looks like votes cast, bills debated, speeches delivered. It looks like everything is working until one day, the mask slips, and we realize the Republic has already been hollowed out. So the question is not simply, what happened to Rome? The real question is, what is happening to us? When you look at Congress today, the debates, the gridlock, the headlines, do you see an institution alive and adapting? Or do you see an echo, a performance, a ritual that comforts us while power shifts elsewhere? History doesn't repeat exactly, but it rhymes. And the rhyme between Rome's Senate and America's Congress is growing louder with every passing year. That leaves us with a challenge, not for historians, but for citizens. Will we continue to play the audience, distracted by spectacle, numbed by cynicism, convinced our voices don't matter? Or will we reimagine what a republic means before the curtain falls for good? Because Rome didn't know when it had crossed the line from republic to empire. They woke up one day still calling themselves free, while living in something very different. And maybe, just maybe, we're closer to that moment than we'd like to admit. So I'll leave it with you. What do you think? Are we preserving a republic or attending its funeral? One ritual at a time? Drop your thoughts in the comments, argue, debate, disagree. That's what keeps history alive. If you found yourself caught by the shadows of Rome in America's story, tap like so more people can discover it. And subscribe to follow this journey. This episode is just one chapter inside the entire history of the Roman Empire we're unfolding on this channel. Rome's story is not over, neither is ours. The only question is, will we choose to learn from it or relive it?